The last of the filming locations I did want to find was the old farmhouse which they used as Fort Edward in the Spelonken. And I had very little to go on, and I'll show you the photo, which to me was an indicator where it might be. There seems to be a road between where the riders, the carbineers, are coming in from their mission. Seems to be a road behind them, but the only other thing I could pick out of that photo was the pinnacle. It seemed to be a peaked pinnacle in the distance. So I went back to the people in the antique shop, and they suggested going next door. There was a news agent, and they told me the mountain range that they thought that was located in the vicinity anyway. But they said that the lady in the news agents had a property out there. She might know it. So I did go next door, and I showed her the photo, and she sort of said, well, it could be anywhere. It's probably on a private farmer's property. But I came to realise that all those, all around that area of Burra are abandoned and crumbling old farmhouses. And even in this picture, which was taken, during the filming, or one of the scenes of Breakham around in 1980, which is, nearly 50 years ago, the house is already on one side. It's crumbling and falling in. So, no, I never did find Fort Edward, but I enjoyed driving around the countryside in that vicinity, in that district of Burra. Beautiful landscape. Thought I'd show you this. These hills are prominent in the film. They've used them as a backdrop for Fort Edward. So in the filmmaker's mind, this was Zoutpansberg in northern Transvaal. They're beautiful. They're soft, gentle sort of valleys and little peaks. You see one sort of pointed peak, a bit like that, as the troopers are riding in back to Fort Edward. But I haven't been able to find where those abandoned farmhouses are, or the old buildings that they used in the film. But I'm going to go up this track to see whether, because Burra, the town, is just over there. I'm wondering if they wouldn't have kept the film crew and the trucks and all the equipment close by for filming. But the locals, they don't know the actual old abandoned farmhouse that I was showing them pictures of from the film. But yeah, certainly it's very different from the northern Transvaal, as you'd know. It's these sort of hills that were used as the backdrop of Fort Edward in the film Breaker Morant. Of course, I've been to Fort Edward in the Spelonken, Zoutpansberg, north of Louis Trichardt, and it's very heavily wooded. But this is how the filmmakers decided to use. But they're glorious. They're soft, rolling, beautiful hills. I don't know, sun's in our eyes, whether we're going to see a good image of this or not. But you see these hills? They're just like we see as a backdrop to Fort Edward, especially when they're riding in after the attack on Captain Hunt's farm, and they're all got their heads down and they're all forlorn. You sort of see in the distance like a spiked peak like that. I thought that may give me a clue, which would put the farmhouse sort of over there somewhere. This dirt track goes up there. We'll drive up and have a look, but I'm doubtful. But yeah, we're not far from Burra. Burra's just over there, so my thinking is they would have kept the camera crew and all the equipment fairly close to town, but well, what do I know? But yeah, that's how they imagined the Spelonken or the Zoutpansberg. But we know they were heavily wooded, weren't they? But this is gorgeous, make no mistake. This is gorgeous, soft rolling hills of South Australia. Stop recording. Scouring the hills around Burra. Lots of little historical markers out there of towns that no longer exist. One called Leighton, where there was a little community hall and school and Baptist church. Nothing there now, but they keep up the history trail with little signs and photos of what used to be there, which is really good. But I'm looking at this doctor's residence on a hunch. When I first contacted the tourist information here, told them what I was after, somebody mentioned a doctor's residence as being part of the film. I wonder if it was when they had the dinner and the Burra sings Sari Mare. For them. But there's another option. It could be that on the porch is a black and white tiled scene. Yeah, this isn't it. There's no black and white tiles here. Dr. Moreau. The island of Dr. Moreau. Now, I also went to the train station looking for that black and white tiled floor with the scene. The scene I'm talking about is Major Thomas, the defence lawyer. Is having a beer, and there's the prosecutor. Is it Major Bolton or something? And he says to Major Thomas, you know you got no chance at all in this, don't you? Even your Australian government has given support to having them shot.
May I join you?
So I don't know where that scene was shot. The only clue is the black and white tiled floor. So it's morning on Friday. Thought I'd come and see the police lock up. As you can see, very early days of settlement, you'd imagine. 1847 there would have been. I would say fairly aggressive local tribes people wanted to challenge you about your right to be here. I don't blame them. So once again we get to use our key. We only used it once. I think it cost $25, $50 deposit or something for the key, but there's heaps of places. There's also a copper mine, an old copper mine. I don't really have much interest in mining. Right. Old police cells are more my style. Right. Love the old cobbling here. I'm wondering if this is slate. Some of you guys would know. But the way they've used the slate with the sandstone. A lot of it in town. I wonder if they came and looked at this as a possible location for the Morant movie. Captain Hunt. Looks like their lavatory. Kind of ready to go home, but I am going to enjoy. That's why I booked this amount of time, that I'm not in a rush. Just going to potter around today in Burra. This looks like a two-person cell. Fairly airy. Ooh. I just thinking yesterday when I drove past this place as kids, my brother and I would have been leaping around like monkeys to see an old police lock-up, stables. There's the place. Jeez, it's dark in there. Seems open. I'll leave it. What could be in there? Anyway, they'll tell us here what we got. It looks like maybe 3 cells, so that's probably why it wasn't enough for Morant. They needed a bigger holding centre to fit all the Gordon Highlanders in. So where did we come in? We came in there, cobbled yard. Oh, maybe they weren't. Oh no, they were. Redruth, that's the name of the jail. So the troopers lived in there. Kitchen. Right. It only closed in 1971 according to that. We can go into the where the troopers. I think you got to go maybe around the front. Okay. Once again, with your key, you can come here anytime. If you want to sort of get some particular lighting to do some photography or some filming. You know, you could do a band video in here. You could come and sleep in this cell, I suppose, if you wanted. If you're that way inclined. Alright, we'll go and have a look at the stables. What was this room? I missed this room. Oh, these are the stables. Alright. Okay. I missed a whole section. This is kind of where you kept your police cars of the day. Looks like maybe you could fit 2 per stall. They probably need 3. Troopers. Oh wow. Listen to this.
It was the worst Christmas Eve I'd ever spent on duty. It was a long time ago, 1849. I remember it well though. Word got to us that there was trouble brewing with this mob of sailors that had arrived in the Burra a few weeks earlier. Deserters, I reckon. By the time we arrived at the German lad's cottage, young Gottlieb Kirbil's place in Karinga, things were in a bloody mess. This sailor chap was on the ground with his head split open, and his mates wanted revenge on the lad what done it. There was a lot of shouting, fighting, and general drunken behaviour around. I sent for the undertaker to remove the body. We arrested the German chap from inside his house and brought him up to the cells in Redruth. He couldn't speak much English. We found out from the bystanders that one of the sailors, John Smith, had been pestering this chap, knocking on his door and wanting a light for his pipe. Smith and his mob were throwing rocks at the house, said they'd burn it down if he didn't open the door. Of course he wouldn't open the door. Gottlieb had this young woman inside. She was expecting a baby and was very frightened. He would have been protecting her when that drunken sailor Smith burst through the door. Gottlieb picked up the nearest weapon to hand, his axe, and hit the sailor on the head. One blow was all it took. But they reckon he gave Smith another whack just to be sure. Gottlieb Kiernel was charged with murder, who stood trial in Adelaide a few weeks later. The judge reckoned he'd been severely provoked, so instead of a hanging, he sentenced him to be transported for 7 years. Off to Port Arthur, Gottlieb Kiernel was sent, but he never got there. The ship, the Lady Denison, sailed from Port Adelaide, and they all disappeared. Ship and all on board. That headstone those brother seamen put on John Smith's grave in the Coringa Cemetery doesn't do justice to the story.
Quite a story. There are a lot of Germans in South Australia. In fact, like the Barossa, where all the grapes and the wine is made, particularly German. South Australia is a little different to most of Australia for you outsiders, in that they never had convicts here. They're rather proud of it too. They were a free, settled state. I don't really know why the German influence. They're even more, I noticed on TV last night, they're even more maniacal about Aussie rules football than us Victorians are. They're up in arms about Kane Corn's debacle. He's an Aussie rules commentator, football commentator, that was made some derogatory comments against one of the teams, and they banned him from the interviewing the team or something. This would have been the entrance to the police station. There's a little kitchen in there. There's a dining room for the troopers. I don't know if our key would get us in. Oh no, it's a private residence, not on the passport. But you can see the main street down there. That's where you would have gone in to report your crimes. Have a look what it looks like from the front. These peppercorn trees are everywhere. Oh yeah, look at that. Real neat. Gorgeous building. Still got the wording at the top, police station. There's that slate and... yeah, I think it's slate. Gorgeous, isn't it? I love that colour pattern, the mustard yellow and the brown. As you walk under these peppercorn trees, you get all those pink peppercorns, and as you step on them you get the peppery smell, the slightly sweet peppery smell. I'm not sure. Let's have a look at this place. And then I thought I'd take a drive out to Mount Bryan, because the old timers in the antique shop, when I showed them the pictures of Fort Edward, they seemed to think that maybe it was out that area. I wonder what this building might be. Oh. Gee, this takes me back as a kid. Mum and Dad taking us out to see historical places like Beechworth, Bendigo, you know, looking at the old Chinese cemetery in Bendigo and Castlemaine with the gold diggings. This is Oh, this is copper. Where I live now is the old gold fields. God knows what they did to extract the copper. The environmental bastardry they would have done to extract copper. I mean, gold sluicing and all that was bad enough, but we'll see what this sign says. Oh, it's the courthouse, of course. Next to the police station, you're going to have a courthouse. Look at this thing. Like something from the railways. Heavy duty. Alright, well it says I've got my passport key. Maybe we can go in. Although it's not mentioned on there. Into that nice courthouse in Beaumont. Is it Beaumont? Where Major Eddie's from? Beaufort. Sorry, Beaufort. No entry here for my key. Okay. Thought I'd come and have a look here. Sounded a little interesting. These are like the last of the miners' dugouts. So in the 1850s, all along here were guys, I guess they were looking for gold. I'm not sure what they were looking for, but this whole creek bed was a hive of miners. And all along these banks, they dug themselves little hovels, little holes to live in. And, you know, it was very unsanitary. There was a lot of, you know, dysentery and typhoid, and it wasn't very good for the, there were children living down here, and they were all in these little hovels until a flood came along and drove them out. But a couple of them survived, which you can see here. And we will be able to go into a couple. Some of the pots they used. There's a couple up here we can go into. Might need the torch on. What a life, eh? I mean, that was so tough working in those days. I was just saying to my friend Brian in South Africa, these days I don't think you get people to do that. Dig into the side of a hill to live, just so you can keep mining day and night. But then I remembered the Zumas in South Africa living underground looking for gold. So some would. Australians wouldn't. I'll go in. Duck my head. There's not much room in here. In fact, there's no room at all. One's pitch black. Okay. Sort of mud daub walls. Oh. Oh, I can see a woman. This one's a little more extensive. Yikes. There she is. Putting the pot on. Well, it would be cool in summer. Difficult to sweep out though. Yep. These are the only remaining dugouts left. Oh. Okay. So after I visited those daub dig-outs in the side of the riverbed there, I sat in the car for an hour or so reading my book, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I'd seen enough of Burra. I mean, I barely scratched the surface as far as historical stuff goes. I never got to the old copper mine, and I did have a quick look at the train station, but anyway, I needed to kill an hour or so I found myself at the old cemetery in Burra. I quite like walking around cemeteries, so I did start walking, and when I came across this grave, which is the grave of the sailor that we heard the story of at the police lockup. It was just coincidental that I stumbled upon it. So just very briefly, I'll remind you, as I remember, it was the German fella Gottlieb, I think his name was, and he was in a hut and he had a heavily pregnant woman with him that he was protecting, and these drunken sailors had come up from Adelaide, I guess, and they were causing a ruckus. They were drinking and being annoying, and they were banging on the German's door wanting, the guy said he wanted a light for his pipe, and the German was telling him to go away. They started throwing rocks at his hut, and because of the pregnant woman, he was very protective. So the guy Smith was banging on his door, wanting the light for his pipe. So the German opened the door and smacked him in the head with I seem to remember it was a wooden axe or something, and smacked him again just to make sure. So the German was arrested, and he was tried in Adelaide, but he wasn't given the death penalty because of extenuating circumstances, but he was going to be sent for 7 years of hard labour, and he was sent on a ship which sank, and all were lost on board. So this is the grave of the sailor that caused all that trouble, Smith.